When I walk into a boardroom and hear we're adopting AI because our competitors are, that's my red flag. Because without strategy, AI isn't an advantage, it's just a shiny distraction. 85% of these AI projects will fail. A lot of businesses can't even quantify ROI. Biggest misconception I encounter with executives is the beliefs that risk is purely technical. Technology decisions can quickly become front page news if they go wrong. And AI is no different. The organizations that succeed are the ones that are treating AI less like a static system and more like a living process that needs constant oversight.
Mary Carmichael. Mary is a leading strategist in IT risk, cybersecurity, and AI governance. She is a 2025 Women in Security honoree and a top 20 cybersecurity influencer. With over 15 years of experience spanning city government, higher education, and private sector advisory, as an advisor with ISACA and director at Momentum Technology, she has shaped AI governance and introduced practical AI maturity models to guide organizational readiness. In this special interview, we'll explore her insights on enterprise risk with specific focus on third-party AI risk management.
I tell boards this, AI maturity isn't about the speed of adoption, it's about the quality of adoption. So the organizations that win won't be the ones that deploy the most tools, they'll be the ones that balance ambition with accountability and turn AI into a competitive advantage.
Mary, welcome to AI Cyber Magazine.
Thank you, Confidence. What an introduction. I do like to add that I try to have fun as part of my job as well. So besides exploring risk frameworks and, all the positive or the negative things that can happen with AI, I try to have fun and meet great people like you. So thank you for this opportunity to discuss a bit more about my background.
And thank you so much for coming on board. Thank you for setting that backdrop, because my first question is just around your career and how it has spanned various sectors. What is your overarching risk management philosophy, and what single misconception about AI risk do you encounter the most when advising executives?
What a great question. So in terms of my background, I am a CPA. So before I jump into the risk management philosophy, I like to define things. So making sure we're all on the same page. So what is AI? And I found lots of people even struggle with defining what AI is. So I kind of like to discuss the definitions first, just to make sure we're all on the same page. And then I'll discuss the risk management philosophy and the single misconception. So for me, AI is simply a technology that performs tasks that require human intelligence, like things like recognizing patterns, understanding language, making recommendations, or generating new content. And it really powers everyday tools we have, like the voice assistants, fraud detection, chatbots. So now, what is AI risk? And really with AI risk, we're discussing potential downsides of using these systems. So it could be biases in training data, errors in prediction, model drift as the system becomes less accurate as conditions change. So when you look at AI risk, it can operate at an everyday level. So imagine a chatbot that gives wrong refund policy information. Customers are frustrated, staff are firefighting, trust erodes. But then risk at a strategic level. So it goes back to how companies are impacted, especially if AI does not function as expected. So in terms of chatbots giving incorrect information, you have reputational damage. And also disruption of a business model. Do your customers trust using your services online? So this impacts your credibility. So when it comes to my risk management philosophy, I like to discuss saying AI is about possibility, it's about the potential, and AI risk is about responsibility. So when I look at the potential in terms of improvements in productivity, accuracy, I look at what can go wrong. So what are the different threats that can impact that? What happens next, and how do we prepare for that? And then also at the same time, if I want to achieve that potential, what are the success factors I need in place? So it kind of goes back to elevating the potential. So are staff aware? Are staff being trained? How am I supporting adoption? So for me, risk management is about, once again, positives and negatives of AI and making sure we have processes to elevate the potential, but also manage or mitigate what can go wrong. So I found single biggest misconception I encounter with executives is the beliefs that risk is purely technical. It's an IT responsibility. And that's not the case. It's more the bigger what if questions. What does this mean for our business model, for trust, long-term resilience, and for customers? And a good case in point is when ChatGPT 3.5 was released 2 years ago, certain companies' stocks were declined in value because people were questioning, are you a viable business model with ChatGPT? Like, for example, Duolingo, which offers language translation services. So from a bigger question is it goes back to how does this impact your business model and how are you using this technology moving forward, whether it's to improve accuracy, productivity, but also improve customer intimacy with your customers. That's my philosophy when it comes to risk, looking at both upside, downside, but also at an operational and strategic level. And I think the most important thing I encourage people is to ask questions.
That's a very robust answer and way to look at AI risk management as a whole. And you've said something about the misconception around it being seen as being technical. So I want to double down there. Why do you think AI governance has become a boardroom issue, not just a technical one? And what is the hardest governance gap organizations overlook when adopting generative AI as a whole?
You just take a look at the news headlines these days. So when AI goes wrong in terms of providing incorrect information, whether it's chatbots or making decisions that bias certain demographics, it impacts your brand reputation, your compliance, especially from a regulatory point of view, and even shareholder value. And also, I think boards have learned from past transformations, whether it's like digital banking, cloud services transformation, that technology decisions can quickly become front page news if they go wrong. And AI is no different. An AI error isn't just a technical bug and can lead to scrutiny, damage, and even loss of market trust. And we have a perfect example here in Canada. So I'm based in Vancouver. So Air Canada has a AI chatbot. That chatbot gave wrong refund information, and that made international news because Air Canada refused to refund the customer for incorrect information. So that ended up going to legal in terms of a tribunal. The decision afterwards was you need to refund the customer. The chatbot is a representative of your organization. You gave incorrect information. You need to make right with the customer. It's not the customer's responsibility to confirm the information being provided by the chatbot. So that's a perfect example. Is right now I think people are not trusting AI. So especially when it's being used to make decisions about your healthcare applications or even your loans. So part of that is you need to show that it's transparent. Here's how decisions are being made in terms of the criteria, but also making sure there's vetting or a human in the loop in terms of if there are any questions. And then it goes back to incident response. So if your chatbot gives incorrect information, what is your incident response to address that customer and his or her needs before he makes a newspaper article? So I think the hardest governance gap I see is when organizations overlook accountability and change management. I think leaders get excited about the technology, but don't really put in clear rules for staff to use it to validate or to even escalate issues, or even why we're using this tool to begin with. So it really goes back to the people impact and just having good organizational change management. To me, governance isn't about algorithms, it's about people and accountability. Without clarifying roles, training staff, or setting escalation paths, the governance framework is just words on a paper.
I absolutely agree with you. And just looking at how quickly AI has been adopted, what's one rule from traditional audit or risk management that is now completely ineffective in an AI first world?
I'm actually quite excited about all the changes that are going to happen to audit. But I do want to focus on one rule from a traditional audit and risk management that doesn't hold up. And that's the idea that you can manage risk through periodic review. So we do these one-time reviews, whether it's quarterly or annual, to test the controls. For some time, that cadence was enough. But now with AI, that environment shifts in real time. A generative AI model can learn new patterns quickly or even produce unexpected outputs depending on how people interact with it. So if you're only checking it once every 6 months, you're already behind. So it kind of goes back to moving from these point-in-time assessments or periodic reviews to continuous monitoring. For example, like if you're rolling out AI tools for customer service and assume it passed testing at launch, it would remain reliable. But in reality, once thousands of customers start asking novel questions, the system may begin producing inaccurate or even misleading answers. So this kind of goes back to model drift. So by the time the next scheduled audit comes around, it's probably too late, especially if the model is giving incorrect information, reaches the news, social media. The reputational damage has already been done. Going back to old systems where classical software development, the old model of set it and forget it is ineffective. So in an AI first world, risk management has to be continuous, ongoing monitoring, feedback loops, human in the middle, and also escalation pathways. The organizations that succeed are the ones that are treating AI less like a static system and more like a living process that needs constant oversight.
That's definitely a soundbite there. your last sentence, and I couldn't agree with you more than I already have. But I want to talk to you about your work with the boardroom and with executives as a whole. When you walk into a boardroom, what's the one analogy or story that always lands with non-technical executives, making them truly understand AI risk? Because they make the decisions anyway.
The analogy I use that always seems to land is think of AI like hiring a brilliant but inexperienced intern. So these are your co-op students. So they want to impress you, they want to work fast, but they don't have judgment. And would you let your intern speak to your biggest client unsupervised? So you shouldn't let AI run unchecked either. So also as part of that, I make it real with headlines. So in terms of, failures, MIT has a great AI incident database tracking in terms of real world events, in terms of failures of chatbots, or even some of the decision making and some of the recent lawsuits. So I think the lesson is simple. When AI makes a mistake, when you think about reputational damage, like the headline isn't the model failed, it's the company failed. So at the end of the day, your company's on the hook. And also customers are expecting more from you instead of blaming once again the AI model or the algorithm.
And in your view, is third-party AI risk harder to manage than traditional vendor risk? If it's a yes to that question, can you explain why?
Oh, yes. It's a big yes. So in terms of third-party AI risk being much harder to manage than traditional vendor risk, I'll explain why. So usually with a typical vendor, let's say a payroll provider or even like a cloud service provider, you have some degree of transparency. You can audit their processes, you have a SOC 2 report, you review their controls, and then you also have a service level agreement. So in some ways, you do have some good information on how the system works, and you can hold someone accountable. But now when you have a SaaS solution or even more of an AI vendor, those models tend to be closed. So you're lacking visibility, and you don't always know what data the model is trained on, how decisions are made, or how the system will behave in new situations. So it's a bit like hiring a recruiter that gives you a short list of candidates, but refuses to explain the criteria they use to select those candidates. So it kind of goes back to the lack of transparency, lack of visibility. And I think a good example is AI-driven hiring tools. So on paper, they look efficient. They're screening resumes, ranking applicants quickly. But then in some cases, the tool, once again, we have Workday and Amazon, was filtering out qualified candidates from non-traditional backgrounds. Part of that is, can the vendor disclose what training data was being used and also the decision logic? Like part of that is you need to open up the hood to see how is the system functioning. So in terms of the logic, but also at the same time, are you able to justify the recommendation? And then as we've seen with Amazon and also Workday with the recent lawsuit, these companies face legal, reputational, and ethical risk, because they don't have the full transparency to fully diagnose the problem. So I guess that's the difference. I think with third-party AI, you're outsourcing decisions to a closed system that you can't fully see into. And that makes the stakes far higher because you're not just outsourcing a service, you're outsourcing part of your reputation as well.
True. I was lucky enough to catch some of your presentation or part of your presentation at RSA, and you outlined 6 steps for third-party AI risk management, and I absolutely found that whole session very insightful. But I'd like you to help walk, our audience through those steps you discussed, and which one do most organizations stumble on first?
Oh, so I first have to give a special shout out to my RSA co-presenter for the third-party AI risk management, Doshima. So Doshima is a researcher at Boise State University. We met through ISACA, so she's an ISACA global leader, and also I'm a global leader here in Canada. So I do want to highlight the importance of community and how I connected with Doshima, and then we end up presenting at RSAC together. So Doshima, hi, I hope you're doing well in Boise, Idaho. So in terms of our presentation, I'll just walk through the 6 steps. The first one is focus on inventory. Do you know where AI is being used across your business, especially when it comes from outside vendors? And part of that is visibility. You can't manage what you don't know exists, but at the same time, concurrently, do you even have an AI strategy? So how is AI going to be deployed within your business? So are you looking at customer service improvements, the back of house functionality? Do you have a warehouse and you want to use robots? So part of that is even defining, given this technology and its capabilities, how does it impact your business model from a operational excellence, customer intimacy, or product leadership? And then from there, what are the use cases and also roadmap you want to move forward with? That leads into step 2, which is classification. So depending on the AI use cases or roadmap, not all AI systems are equal. So a chat bot answering FAQs carries a different level of risk than the AI model making hiring or lending decisions. So based on that classification, that leads into additional questions in terms of due diligence, which is step 3. So due diligence is the questions you ask the vendor about their training data, bias testing, security controls, and explainability. And your SOC 2 report is not good enough because it doesn't cover the broad range of AI risk. And that's a big misconception. So once again, based on your classification of your AI system, that triggers additional questions because depending on that AI system and its impact on your business, you need to have a greater deal of rigor because now you're dealing with an AI vendor that can potentially bring down your business if things go wrong or impact your reputation. So based on that due diligence in terms of the questions being responded, this is where you get into step 4, which is your contractual controls. So based on the vendor's assessment in terms of the demos, their reputation, references, what are the specific AI clauses that need to be built into contracts? Covering transparency, audit rights, and also accountability for errors. And then from that, once you have the contract in place, it gets implemented. And then step 5 is monitoring and also detecting any type of issues like drift detection. Because unlike traditional software, AI doesn't stay static. Models change over time. New features can be introduced unannounced by the vendors. So you need continuous oversight, not just periodic audits, which kind of goes back to my earlier point. We need to be constantly monitoring these systems. And lastly, step 6 is about governance and escalation. So once again, if things go wrong, what's the clear ownership? Who owns the risk? Who's monitoring? Who's having conversations with the vendor, especially if there's unannounced changes? And also, if you're unhappy with the vendor, what are your provisions for leaving that relationship and actually getting your data from that system? So that goes back to the 6 steps of third-party AI risk management. And part of that is really working closely with your vendor. So your vendor is your partner in terms of what's their roadmap, what features they plan on rolling out, and also do you trust their operational discipline when it comes to the AI lifecycle and how they support these systems and build it over time. So in terms of the step most organizations stumble on, this should be no surprise. Step number 1, people like to skip the basics. It's hard to do an inventory, I have to admit that, but even having a big picture conversation about what is our AI strategy? What are our use cases of interest? But also from a people perspective, what is the AI adoption? Are we trying to, cost save, trying to do cost avoidance? Are we trying to have AI as an assistant to the staff? Even the big picture about the impact on staff is not even being discussed. So what I tell leaders is start with visibility first, understand both what you have in place, but also what's your plans moving forward.
That's so eye-opening. And just really going back still to your experience doing this for enterprises, what have you seen as the biggest security blind spots in enterprise vendor risk management programs when it comes to third-party AI? What, in your opinion, are the potential consequences?
I think the biggest blind spot I see with vendor risk programs is still treating AI like it's traditional software, and it's not traditional software. Someone's going to ask the vendor the usual security questions like, do you encrypt the data? Do you meet compliance standards? But they don't really dig into the unique risks of AI itself, especially in terms of the AI lifecycle. Where is the data being sourced? How's it being trained? How do they handle fairness in terms of decision making? So, for example, companies rarely ask about how the data was sourced, where it came from, because potentially that can expose a company to privacy or even IP violations. And they don't necessarily consider model manipulation risks like prompt injections or adversarial inputs that could make the system behave in unintended ways. And also, they never really account for model drift. So once again, we tend to roll out these systems and forget, but we need to monitor model drifts. And so in terms of new data coming in, is the model performing as expected? So these consequences can be serious. Like the third-party AI recruiting tool may unintentionally filter out candidates in a discriminatory way. Now you're dealing with lawsuits and reputational damage. But also chatbots, customer service tools may be tricked by a malicious prompt into revealing sensitive data. So there's numerous Reddits in terms of how you can trick these chatbots into giving inappropriate responses. It's the company, not the vendor, that ends up with the headlines. So that's why I tell boards, the blind spot isn't missing controls, is missing the right questions. So if you don't ask questions about data, drift, manipulation, you're effectively outsourcing risk you don't understand. And in today's environment, that's a recipe for lost trust, especially among your customers.
Not asking the right questions. That's so profound. And you've given some of the brilliant examples earlier on in that response, but I want us to really double down. Can you please give more examples of a third-party AI risk that a company might be completely unaware of today, but could lead to a significant breach?
One of the biggest risks I see with third-party AI, and one many companies don't realize, is how easily these tools can turn into an unintentional data leak vector. So let me explain. So imagine this, an employee is using like an AI writing assistant to polish up a contract or draft a product roadmap, and it seems harmless. But let's say the tool is set to opt in by default. That means their prompts might be stored or even being used to train the vendor's model. And without knowing it, your IP just walked out the door. So I found many SaaS platforms are now pushing these generative live features without notice, or not following the contract. These are material changes. You have to give change management and communication notification. So part of that is no one in IT or legal had a chance to review it, but your risk profile changed overnight. So now you have a SaaS solution that now has generative AI features, and also now it's set to be opt-in by default, which means your data is being trained on the training model. So I found that the breach of tomorrow may not come in from a hacker break-in. It comes from the defaults that you don't change or updates within the software solution. And that's the hidden reality of third-party AI risk. So we want to move to an opt-out model by default, and then we can choose to opt in. But right now I found even with, even LinkedIn is a perfect example. It's like, oh, we'll use your data to train the model. And I'm seeing this to be a growing area of concern.
So talking about headlines, if enterprises ignore third-party AI risks today, what will the headlines in 2027 look like?
Oh, they're already ignoring third-party AI risks today. Like this is like today's headlines. So I was just thinking about third-party AI risk headlines in 2027. Then maybe we should talk about geopolitical risk, because we tend to focus on third-party AI in terms of using tools like Copilot or ChatGPT for organizations. Now we have something called sovereign AI. So the question is, for example, at the White House, they've issued an edict saying they want to make American technology the dominant technology worldwide. So that's a third-party AI risk issue. So as a country like in Canada or even Europe, do we develop our own AI solutions and have sovereign AI? So I feel like the third-party AI risk will elevate to more of a geopolitical level in 2027. But from an everyday perspective, like we already have lawsuits. You have lawsuits about AI decision-making tools discriminating against a certain group of people. We also have like chatbots giving incorrect information, and also companies struggling to, explain their black box AI model. So that risk is happening. But I think next year it's just going to be more elevated to a global issue. But then I was thinking about, do we ever have positive headlines about AI? So do we have headlines saying that, a company outperforms its peers as investors back as a responsible AI strategy? So I was thinking about, do we actually have good news stories about AI?
You know what they say about good news? That good news doesn't sell.
Yeah, good news. I was thinking like, what are some good news stories? Like, this is where I asked ChatGPT to give me some good news stories about AI. So like, for example, healthcare provider cuts patient wait times by 30% with safely deployed AI triage. Will that make the news? I don't know. I don't think so. So I think there's going to be quite a bit of negative news in terms of things going wrong. And then also just once again, the geopolitical pressure of these AI solutions and how countries will respond to that.
Yeah, it's literally an AI race right now. And just looking back at, the impressive work you've done so far, I'm so proud to know you, Mary. But you've built practical AI maturity models. I'd like to ask, what does an AI mature organization look like from a risk and governance perspective? And what's a realistic first step for a company just starting this journey?
So given my CPA background, I need to define what is an AI mature organization. I don't mean an organization that has the flashiest tools or has the most number of tools. I mean an organization that treats AI as part of its business strategy, not just some sort of like side IT tech experiment. So I found from a risk and governance perspective, mature organizations has 4 pillars. So the first one, do you have a clear strategy and roadmap? So does leadership know why they're using AI? Once again, it's a technology. The technology serves some sort of use case and achieves a business outcome. So does its AI solutions create value? And also when they are deploying these solutions, whether it's natural language processing, agentic AI, do they know what risks they're accepting? And of the risks they're not willing to accept, do they have mitigation plans in place and clear risk ownership? The second pillar is visibility. So they know exactly where AI is in play across their business, including third-party systems and shadow tools. So they're very aware. Third, accountability. So once again, this goes back to the unhappy situation. So we need to define every AI system has an owner and a clear escalation path if something goes wrong. So for example, chatbots that give incorrect information, or once again, decision systems that decline people based on their background incorrectly. And lastly, integrated governance. AI risk is woven or integrated into vendor management, audit cyber compliance, it's not treated as a side project. And this leads into operational discipline. And this is, I think, the last tenet of an AI mature organization. They monitor for model drift. They don't forget about these systems. They understand their training sources, and they can answer the tough questions as well in terms of the threat modeling and what needs to be in place to address that. Those are my 5 main pillars when it comes to an AI mature organization. And I found when you have these pillars in place, you can connect AI initiatives to business goals, measure the upside, but also manage the downside with confidence. And for those companies that are starting out, I think the first step is simple. Understand where AI is being used, but also have the conversations at a board or executive level in terms of what is AI? What does it mean for our industry? Are we being challenged as an ongoing business concern by these tools? What are some of the use cases? Where would it add value? I tell boards this: AI maturity isn't about the speed of adoption, it's about the quality of adoption. So the organizations that win won't be the ones that deploy the most tools. They'll be the ones that balance ambition with accountability and turn AI into a competitive advantage. So once again, it goes back to your business strategy.
That's really profound. But what have you seen as the biggest red flag that an organization isn't AI ready? I mean, even if they think they are.
One of the biggest red flags is when people say, oh, we're rolling this out because everyone else is doing it. They don't know why. There's lots of hype. Everyone else is doing it. We need to do a project. So to me, it tells me they're chasing hype instead of solving a real business problem. And this kind of goes back to AI without a purpose always turns into an expensive experiment. And this is where you see Gartner or some of these external research saying that a lot of businesses can't even quantify ROI. They're in a pilot. They don't know exactly why they're doing it or what value they're achieving. So it kind of goes back to even failed projects. And another interesting stat is Gartner said around 85% of these AI projects will fail, mostly due to data. So the data is not of good quality. And also staff have biases in terms of that's reflected in the training model or even not being trained appropriately for these systems. So when I walk into a boardroom and hear we're adopting AI because our competitors are, that's my red flag. So because without strategy, AI isn't an advantage. It's just a shiny distraction.
I agree with you. And then beyond just technical controls, what organizational and cultural shifts are necessary to build a risk-aware AI culture?
So I think about a risk-aware AI culture is having a culture where we're able to talk about risk and ask questions. So this kind of goes back to psychological safety, because sometimes with organizations, people have their pet projects and you're not exactly allowed to ask questions. So to me, risk-aware is what are we trying to achieve, understanding the why, but also understanding what do I need to have in place to be successful? So what are my critical success factors? Are they in place? But also, what are the possible disruptions or threats that could impact this initiative, and how are we managing that? So that to me is risk aware. We are safe to ask questions, and then based on those questions, those responses, we set up a risk management program to support that initiative. But in the day, when I think about risk aware AI culture, it's all about people. And I tend to frame this in ProSci's ODCAR model. So ODCAR is a model that's being used for organizational change management. And if you want to achieve a risk-aware culture, you have to go through the organizational change management cycle. So the first one as part of the ODCAR model is awareness. Employees need to understand why AI risk matters, but not in abstract terms, but in practical ones. So what happens if an AI recruiting tool screens out the wrong candidates or the chatbot gives wrong information? Though awareness creates urgency. So why is this important? As part of the change management ODCAR model, the second shift is desire. You want to make people want to do the right things with AI, not feel like they're following the rules. So that means connecting responsible AI usage to the company's values, such as fairness, trust, and reputation. And the third is knowledge. Staff needs training. So not just on how to use these tools, but also how to escalate concerns. They need to be empowered. So if they see something that's not working right, they're able to escalate that and then brainstorm and address that solution quickly. And lastly comes ability. We want to make sure people are given the resources and permission to act. And then that is supported by reinforcement. So leadership has to celebrate small wins. When the team catches a problem early, that's how culture sticks. So risk awareness becomes part of daily behavior. So you want to make sure the change sticks. So that's probably a bit of a lengthy answer, but it really goes back to you have a culture, you want to be able to talk about risk, but you need to implement that change through ADCAR. But the most important part is leadership. Leadership needs to be visible, engaged, and walk the talk.
Absolutely. But I'd like us to claw right in and get to the belly of more talk, right? What is your most controversial opinion on AI governance that might spark a debate in the industry?
When it comes to AI governance, I don't think AI governance is entirely new. I know there's lots like, oh, we need to have a new framework for AI governance. It's something brand new. And we kind of frame it as uncharted territory. But when I think about AI governance, the fundamentals have always been in place for decades. So when I think of technology change, we had the mainframe to client server, to then we had web to cloud, now AI. All those changes needed governance. So I was just thinking about just my past, like within financial services, we always manage AI model risk. Like we've been using AI for a number of years when it comes to forecasting or even predicting risk. Healthcare, there's AI in terms of patient systems. Even cybersecurity was using AI in terms of data protection. So I found just with these changes in technology, the principles always remain the same. You need to have visibility, accountability, and transparency. And this is where I see the real risk when organizations treat AI governance as something separate, like spin up new committees, design complicated structures, or sometimes they lose sight of the basics. But in reality, we have most of these governance capabilities. We have risk management, compliance, audit. They already exist. So the task is not to reinvent governance, but to integrate AI in terms of what we have in place. So I guess my controversial opinion is this: AI governance does not need to be built from scratch. The principles are familiar. The difference is applying them into a new technology context.
Absolutely. How do you see emerging technologies like blockchain or federated learning playing a role in mitigating third-party AI risk?
Oh, yeah. So people have asked me about emerging tech like blockchain and federated learning. I see them as tools that can help reduce third party risk, but they need to be used in the right way. So let's take blockchain. So its superpower is transparency. So just imagine this. So every time a vendor updates an AI model, like for example, it changed the training data, tweaked the algorithm, or patched the system, it had to be logged in an immutable ledger. So instead of taking the vendor's word for it, you have a clear audible trail. So this is a game changer for accountability, especially when regulators or even auditors ask, how did AI make this decision? So now let's take federated learning. So normally if a vendor wants to train an AI model, they pull in your data. So your customer records, your patient files, or transaction logs. This creates a huge risk of leaks or misuse. Federated learning flips that around. Your data stays put, but the model travels. So think of it like this. So instead of sending your private data to the cloud, the vendor sends the algorithm to your system. The model learns locally and only sends back the insights, not the raw information. So that means hospitals, like for our example, can improve patient care records, or even banks can collaborate on fraud detection without ever handling over sensitive data. But here's the reality check. So neither blockchain or federated learning is a silver bullet. Blockchain does add complexity and cost. Federated learning is powerful, but technically challenging to implement at scale. So my view is simple. These tools give you more transparency and privacy, but they don't replace governance. So you still need clear contracts, accountability, and oversight. And also I do want to mention some other tools, especially for the OWASP community. So their OWASP is working on an AI bill of materials. This is very similar to a software SBOM. So this documents your data sets, your libraries, models used. So improving traceability, especially when it comes to procurement and third-party risk. And I do want to highlight model cards and data sheets and data sets. So this is standardized documentation to explain your model. So this is where emerging technologies can play a role in helping us manage this risk.
There's actually an article coming out in this fall issue about AI bombs. So thank you for mentioning that and sort of linking things in there. But I definitely agree with all what you said. And to close out this fantastic conversation, I want you to share what the single most important piece of information you can give to any security professional or say business leader to prepare them for the future of AI risk.
Yeah, my advice is simple. See AI risk as both a positive and a negative. And the danger isn't just in the bias or data leaks, but it's also falling behind if you ignore AI. So I think the biggest risk is not pursuing it. So once again, the digital transformation, you need to keep up. And then I think my second most important piece of advice is asking questions, being curious, having that risk-aware culture. So understanding, where is AI being used in my business? Who owns it? How are people being trained? What do we do when there are incidences? So asking yourself the bigger questions at a strategic level and seeing how it's being implemented at an operational level. So that's my takeaway. So once again, there's good and bad. Move forward with it and asking questions.
Thank you so much, Mary. I absolutely had a blast chatting with you. And I know any business leader that gets to see this episode or this chat will definitely have a lot of value to glean from it. Thank you so much for your time.